There's just a few more areas here that could use a little more attention. So these vertices underneath are being pulled away by some other joint. So I'm going to weight them a little bit more towards the clavicle here by adding some influence, and maybe even adding just a little less influence there, or replacing it with a little less so it evens out there. So it's all about kind of just playing with it, getting the right values in there. And I think that looks pretty good there. That whole portion doesn't look as weird and jagged anymore, so looks good to me. What doesn't look good is this little rivet here, and I think this rivet is just being pulled away by the clavicle. So all we have to do is remove that weight, and it should snap back into the spine 3 weight, which is more where it should belong. I'm going to go to the solid brush here and use that to completely remove all the weights there, so we don't get any triangles sticking out into space when he's moving around. We know that it's all weighted to that third spine joint. So let's close out of that tool. I'm going to move his clavicle back by going into the channel box and resetting those attributes just like we did before. And I'm just going to give his spine another wiggle just to make sure everything's staying in place. And it looks like we can see some weird stuff happening here with his button still. I think it's not completely weighted to that third spine. So you know what we can do. We can just grab its vertexes, go into the component window, and find spine 3 in here. I'm going to hide 0 columns because I think spine 3 is part of its weight value. So I'm going to click on the top of spine 3, go down to the bottom, shift click on the bottom, and fill these all in with 1, and close that window. And hopefully we get a better result with that, just being weighted on spine 3. Yeah, so it's staying in place. It looks good. Looks good, looks good. You can move left and right. Looks good, looks good. I'd say that's looking pretty good. However, we still have to deal with this belt here. And I have a particular way of dealing with this because it's kind of in an area of a lot of different intersecting weight values. So we have the center joint, we have spine 1, we have the hip. So what we want to do is evenly distribute all the vertex weight between all the relevant joints that's being weighted to these vertexes. And we're going to do that through the component editor. So I'm just going to select the entire mesh that I want to work with. So it's the belt, there's this flappy part, there is some details in there that we want to grab. Let's make sure we got the whole thing. And if you want to check to make sure you got everything, you can do the isolate view up here in the viewport. Check it out and see to make sure. Looks like we got it all. If we don't have it all, we'll notice when we start moving the character again. But now we go to the vertex selection mode, and then we can find the component editor window again. And I'm going to pick one joint to start with and weight that all as 1. So I'm going to find spine 1. I'm going to start with that. And I'm just going to make this belt entirely controlled with spine 1. So now when we move that around, when we move the hips around, we don't get any movement there. But when we start bending the spine, it should follow along decently. It's not great. So now what we want to do is start dividing these values. So I'm going to reselect the face tool and reselect all the different aspects of this belt, and then go back into the component editor after going to vertice selection. And here I'm going to unhide these 0 columns, and I'm going to split this weight value with the pelvis joint because I think the pelvis is a big factor in where this belt should be moving. So I'm going to scroll through this list and find our pelv joint, and I'm going to give this a value of 0.5 for now. And that way, if we go back to hide 0 columns over here in the checkbox, we can see that now we're evenly distributing weight between the first spine and the pelvis joint. So now, if we move the pelvis, it should fall a little bit. And if we also move the spine around, it's going to be following just a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good, actually. Let's see if we're getting any weird clipping. Looks like we're getting some weird stuff. But I think that is because our hip is actually pushing up a lot more than we want. Or maybe we want the hip to control a little bit of the belt. Let's give that a whirl. So to do that, I'm going to go into the Paint Skin Weights tool. I'll close out of the channel box and find the left hip and see what value we have here. It seems like it's a little high up here. That's why we're seeing some clipping. So maybe we can remove some of that. I'm going to select the soft brush because I want this to be a little more subtle, these adjustments. So I'm going to remove some of this weight up here because I think that's a little too much. I'm also going to remove a little bit of this weight. And now I'm going to select with the eyedropper tool the influence that this part of the shirt has, and I want the belt to match at least a little bit to that value. And now I can paint on the belt And that should bring it up a little bit, or bring it to where it looks a little more normal, so that we're not getting too much clipping there whenever the hips are moving. And I'm going to reduce this value as we move away from the hip, just so it transitions into the back, just by moving the value down and down as we go around until it's completely removed here. I'm going to paint with 0 a little bit just to push this down a little. Maybe around here in the front as well. So that looks pretty good there. So I'm going to quit out of that tool, and that looks better. He can move his hip a little bit, and there's no clipping or anything. We still get some clipping when he goes down, but up looks okay. So let's go to the down position. We'll fix that. Go into the Paint Skin Weights tool, and we'll see that this part of the shirt should actually be following along with the belt. So I'm going to give it that same value, and that should tuck it right underneath the belt so we no longer see it. And that should fix that. Let's go back to bind pose by returning these values to 0. And now our belt should be looking pretty good. We can probably move the spine and see that that's looking a little more accurate to what it should be doing. So that's cool. So next, I think we're ready to move up and take care of this whole beard situation and his head and face and stuff, because that ain't right. We got to fix that. But it should be pretty easy. So we'll take care of that next.